Okay, so today we are going to read through the account of King Ahab. Well, yeah, basically. We'll be finishing off the book of 1 Kings in the process, and read a little bit more out of 2 Chronicles. We have gotten through the first several batch of kings from the divided kingdom period, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. There is one long dynasty reigning in the south, uninterrupted, except for a brief usurpation that we're going to read about later. The south has a single dynasty that goes all the way until the end of the kingdom, and even beyond, because it's that dynasty that ultimately results in Jesus Christ in centuries to come. The north, however, does not have that kind of stability. Because there are no good kings in the north, and all the northern kings end up falling into the same behaviors over and over as all the previous ones, if not even worse, they are not going to have stable dynasties, and there's just going to be one after another after another. We've already read about Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who started the northern line of kings. He only had one son who sat on the throne for a couple of years. Then he was replaced by Baasha, who also only had one son that sat on the throne for a couple of years. And then he was replaced by a guy named Zimri, who was only king, if you can even call him that, for 7 days. He was a military commander who instigated a form of coup. And then after Zimri was taken out, eventually a guy named Omri is going to wrest control away. There's going to be a bit of a fight to get there, though. And Omri's son will be Ahab, and Ahab is going to be the villain of the next several chapters. And Ahab is going to marry Jezebel, and she'll be the villain also of the next several, all the rest of 1 Kings and the 2 Kings. So let's go back and read about Omri, who is the father of Ahab, and so Ahab is a member of the House of Omri. So we had a guy named Zimri who came along, and he took out the line of Baasha. He was only around for about 7 days. And then he was attacked in his citadel at Tirzah. He lit the palace on fire and killed himself. So now we're in 1 Kings 16. Let's start reading here in verse 21. Then the people, this is after Zimri's short-lived rebellion ends. Then the people of Israel, this is the northern kingdom of Israel, were split into 2 factions. Half supported Tibni, son of Gineath, for king, and the other half supported Omri. Now we read about Omri a few verses ago in the account of Timri. Backing up a few verses, in verse 16, it says, when the Israelites in the camp, this is the military camp around a Philistine town, heard that Zimri had plotted against the king and murdered him, they proclaimed Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel, that very day they're in the camp. So he's a military guy. Zimri, we read about earlier, was commander of half of the chariot troops. Omri apparently is the commander of the entire army. So the army is behind Omri. And it's probably why Omri is stronger than Timnah. As we get down here into back to where we were a moment ago, there's 2 potential candidates to the throne, Omri and Timnah. Omri ends up winning out, probably because he has the backing of the military. The rest of the culture, the rest of the country apparently supported Tibni, but they weren't strong enough to hold off Omri, who probably had the support of the vast majority of the military, since he was their commander. So now Israel is going to be ruled by a military line of kings. So back to where we were a moment ago. Half supported Tibni, son of Gineath, for king, and the other half supported Omri. But Omri's followers proved stronger than those of Tibni, son of Gineath. So Tibni died, and Omri became king. I don't know if that means he was killed, if he was overthrown, if he was murdered, died in battle. I'm not sure. It just says he died. At any rate, he's dead, and Omri is now the king. In the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, Omri became king of Israel, and he reigned 12 years, 6 of them in Tirzah. He bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver, and built a city on the hill, calling it Samaria, after Shemer, which Samaria basically means Shemer's hill or something like that, the name of the former owner of the hill. Now, this is a very significant move, because Samaria is going to be the capital of the northern kingdom from this point forward. In fact, the northern kingdom is sometimes going to be referred to simply as Samaria. So in the sections of the scriptures to come, when people talk about Samaria, they might be talking about the actual city, but they're also talking about the overall northern kingdom. In the New Testament, when they talk about the Samaritans, they're talking about people from the kingdom where Samaria was the capital, the northern kingdom. By that time, they're a mixed breed of people who have intermarried into and out of the Jewish line so much that their lines become polluted. And so the more pure-blooded people down in the south and what's left of the Judah kingdom don't like the Samaritans. That's where they get that name from. In some of the prophecy sections, some of the prophets to come, like Ezekiel, who is going to compare Jerusalem and Samaria to each other as two daughters of a king. We're going to be comparing Jerusalem and Samaria to each other as capital cities and standouts and representatives of their entire nations. So this acquiring of Samaria and making it the new capital city is a very significant move that will affect how we refer to the northern kingdom from this point forward. But Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and sinned more than all those before him. We say this about practically every northern king. Every northern king commits all the sins of the previous ones and then some. They just keep getting worse. He walked in all the ways of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and in his sin, which he had caused Israel to commit, so that they provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their worthless idols. As for the other events of Omri's reign, what he did and the things he achieved, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Omri rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria. And Ahab, his son, succeeded him as king. Now Ahab is going to be, like I said, the main bad guy of the next several chapters of this book of Kings. But keep in mind that Ahab is the son of Omri. And in their culture, of course, the son of someone brings glory or dishonor to his father. So everything that we read about here with Ahab ultimately is an indirect reflection on the legacy of Omri. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel. Now, we read up here a few verses ago that Omri became king in the 31st year. And I read down here that he reigned for 12 years. 6 of them in Tirzah. And in the 38th year, Ahab becomes king. So I don't know what that 31st year mark of Omri becoming king of Israel is when he defeated Timnah and became king over all Israel, or if there was a co-regency of a number of years with Omri and Ahab, which is possible. It's hard to say. I mean, there's a few different ways you could look at it. At any rate, according to this data, Omri is king in the 31st year of Asa, and Ahab becomes king in the 38th year of Asa. But Omri reigns as king for 12 years. So there's a few years missing that we have to account for. Either Omri was king, was not fully king until he became king of Israel and Samaria, or Ahab was king early, co-regency of a few years before Omri's death. Anyway, in the 38th year of Asa, king of Israel, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. Once again, we're saying that. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. So all the northern kings so far have done that. All of them, every one of them, from Jeroboam down to his son, down to Baasha, down to his son, Zimri was only around for 7 days. Omri and all of them have done that so far. But Ahab not considers that, not only does that, he considers it to be trivial, no big deal, but he also married Jezebel. Boo, Jezebel, boo. Daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. Ethbaal, of course, is the name derived from Baal. Baal, or Baal, how do you pronounce it, means Lord. So Well, you see a lot of names that have Baal or Baal in them, which basically means Lord or Son of the Lord or Lord of whatever. So Baal means, Son of the Lord or Servant of the Lord or something like that. In their language, that's what Baal means. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. So he's not only following Jeroboam. Jeroboam, at least in his mind, was substituting proper Jehovah worship with these calves. These calves that he made and this religious system that he instituted was intended to be, they were still intending to be worshiping Jehovah. Now, they weren't doing so properly. And it was a sin which he committed and all the kings after him committed. But at least they were still trying to direct their attention towards Jehovah. This guy is not doing that. He considers it no big deal to have these golden calves everywhere, and now he's setting up Baal statues everywhere too, at the request of his wife. Now remember, something else to keep in mind. Jezebel is a daughter of a king, so she's a princess, so she's used to the royal life. And in the Sidon was the capital city of Phoenicia, which was on the coast of Israel to the north. The Philistine area was in the southern part of the coast. The farther north up the coast you went, you got to the Phoenician territory, and Sidon and Tyre were the big Phoenician cities. And they were a major seagoing people. They controlled a lot of the seafaring routes in the Mediterranean Sea at this time. And Jezebel was a daughter of their king, Ethbaal, who was not only a king, but was also a priest. For the most part, in the cultures of this day and time, the king was also the high priest. Now, in Israel, that was not the case. The king and the priest were separate, and that was the reason why. The king was not to be a priest, and the priest was not to be a king, in order to keep these offices separate. That was not the case in most of the nations around them. In most of the nations around them, the king was also the high priest. So Ethbaal is not only a king of Phoenicia, he is also the high priest of this Baal. And his daughter, Jezebel, is being married into Ahab's family to cement an alliance between Ahab and Phoenicia. And she is bringing Baal worship from her home and her house, where her father is a high priest of Baal, into Israel. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole. And that's, Asherah is a female consort of Baal. Baal is basically the storm god, and he fertilizes Asherah, which is the fertility goddess that goes along with him. So you tend to see the Baal altars and the Asherah poles in the same places together here. Now the Asherah poles apparently are made out of wood. And of course wood rots. So I don't know if we have any Asherah poles that we found today, because that would have been, this was 3,000 years ago. So I'm not sure if any of those Asherah poles survived, and we really know what they look like. Some of the Baal altars have, or some of the altars, we can, some of those high places, you can see where the altars may have been, or remnants of them, because those are stone, so those are going to last longer. But I'm not sure if any of the Asherah poles have survived. I've never seen an image of one. I'm not sure if, because again, that would have been wood, and wood rots. 3,000 years later, it's not going to be much left. Ahab also made an Asherah pole, and did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than did all the kings of Israel before him. In Ahab's time, Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. He laid its foundation. Remember that? That was the city that they walked around and made collapse. He laid its foundations at the cost of his firstborn son, Abiram, and he set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub, in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken by Joshua, son of Nun. Let's go back and look at that, just so we know, just so we're clear on what that is. In Joshua, the early chapters of Joshua, their first stop on their way into the land was at Jericho, which of course has the famous story of them walking around the city and the gates, the walls fell. At the end of all that, in Joshua 6, verse 26, he says, "At that time, Joshua pronounced this solemn oath, 'Cursed before the Lord is the man who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho.'" At the cost of his firstborn son will he lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest will he set up its gates. So that has happened. That was around 1400 BC when that happened. Now we are around 860 or so BC. So 600 years later, 500 plus years later, let's just say it that way. And Jericho has been rebuilt. And the guy who did it apparently did it at the urging of Ahab. It says in verse 34, in Ahab's time. So apparently Ahab was the mastermind behind this. He got this heel of Bethel to do it, I guess. But however it worked, this guy did it, and he did in fact lose his two sons, as Joshua said anyone doing this would do. Now we're going into 1 Kings 17, and a major new character is being introduced here. Now Elijah the Tishbite, from Tishbe in Gilead, or Tishbe of the settlers, whatever, said to Ahab. So now we're introducing Elijah. We're not getting a genealogy or a background from him, except to say that he's from Tishbe in Gilead. He was probably a priest, or maybe a Levite, who was, because the priests and the Levites are supposed to go from city to city and preach the word and teach the people about God and the word that he gave to Moses and all that. So Elijah is probably originally from one place and then went to Gilead. Gilead is in that area beyond the Jordan River. So he probably was originally from the western part of the country, ended up going to the eastern part of the country for some duties, and now he's dealing with Ahab. He's a prophet. He's going to be the guy who transforms the office of the prophet from what it had been previously into what it will be going forward. These prophets are going to be acting differently from this point forward than they had been before. In the end, the job of a prophet is to speak the message that God puts in his mouth to speak. And that's the truth. That's true for Elijah. It's true for his successor, Elisha. And it's true for all of us. It's true for the ones that came before Elijah, and it's true for the ones that came after Elijah. That's not any different. That's the purpose of a prophet, is to speak the message God puts in his mouth to speak. But Elijah is going to be doing this in conjunction with this ministry of miracles and signs and wonders, which up until now the prophets haven't really been doing, except of course Moses, it was through him and Aaron that God performed the plagues in Egypt. So anyway, and that was during a time of stark unbelief. So now we're entering another time of stark unbelief here. So now we gotta show the people that God is still around and is still God. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives." Actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and start a new video.